Hi everybody, I'm Dr. John Douillard and welcome to LifeSpa.com. And today I want to talk about getting into the zone. You know, we're entering into the 2021 Olympics, and I wanted to talk about how athletes are so desperate to seek out that place where my best race is my easiest race. You know, I wrote a book back in 2000 called Body, Mind, and Sport. And Billie Jean King, dear friend of mine, wrote the foreword to that book along with Martina Navratilova, two great tennis players. And Billy said that when I would transport myself beyond the turmoil of the court to a place of total peace and calm. I wrote a book called The Psychic Side of Sports decades and decades ago. It got me so fascinated with this thing called the zone, the runner's high, where you can get that place where you're just running as fast as you can, but it feels effortless. And my book, Body, Mind, Sport, and the research we published on that in the International Journal of Neuroscience was really designed to just prove that we could replicate the zone. And one of the major tools for that was nose breathing versus mouth breathing. And that's the research that we did. And now, 30 years later, we have this amazing research being done. James Nestor's book called Breath, The Oxygen Advantage by Patrick McEwen. Great books who've really taken the nose breathing understanding even to another level. And I feel like it's really important for us to talk about that. Now, what I wrote the book Body, Mind, and Sport about was to actually help people get into the zone. And that's what I want to talk to you all about today, is how you can replicate the zone in your workout every time, sort of like an effortless exercise workout protocol. And there's an article that I'm talking about as I talk here that takes you step by step. There's 6 steps that I take you through to make that happen, which is really cool, all based on the science that we actually published. Now, there's a book out maybe about, 5 or 10 years ago called The Rise of Superman. And it was all about these elite, extreme athletes who would do crazy things like skateboard and jump over the Great Wall of China and jump off a cliff on your skis and then launch a parachute and then land. Things that most people generally wouldn't do, right? And they measured brainwave activity, and during those fleet seconds of that peak extreme experience, the brain would slip into a coherent alpha state through extreme sports. And what was sad about the book, The Rise of Superman, was at the end of the book, a lot of these extreme athletes, because they couldn't replicate that extreme euphoria again and again and again as they got older, they ended up, a lot of them, depressed or broken down in their body where they couldn't replicate that. And what I was really fascinated by was when I read the book and I looked at what they were saying the research said was the identifier of the zone. It was exactly what we produced in 1992 in our research on nasal breathing versus mouth breathing. And we found that when you breathe through your nose, the brain actually slips into a coherent state, which means all parts of the brain are doing the same thing. Which I imagine if you're skateboard jumping over the Great Wall of China, you need all parts of your brain doing the same thing. And that was called brainwave coherence. And we replicated that simply by closing our mouth. And we also noticed that the brain went into an alpha state, which is also a coherent meditative state. So there's an awesome level of composure and calm. I like to call that the eye of the storm. The bigger the eye, the more powerful the winds. And if you can function from that calm, like Billie Jean King said, I would transport myself beyond the turmoil of the court to a place of total peace and calm. Like Roger Bannister, when he broke the 4-minute mile, said, I felt like I was going slow, and like the world was standing still, yet he was running faster than any man alive at that point in time. So how is that happening? Well, they drop into this place where their brain is in a meditative calm, but their body, the winds of the storm, are going in dynamic activity. And the bigger the eye, the bigger and the more often you dip the cloth in the dye of that calm, the more you train the body to be calm and support activity, the more you can slip into that zone. That's where meditation comes in. Meditation, I think, is a critical part. Yoga is a critical part. Meditation has been shown to produce alpha production in the brain. In our studies, it actually was replicated. In fact, we found that when people went into the zone, their brain went into a coherent alpha state. There's 2 types of nervous systems we have in the autonomic nervous system, one called the fight or flight system, one called the parasympathetic system. Fight or flight is get up a tree, save your life from a bear that's chasing you. Parasympathetic is build, rejuvenate, and digest your food, right? So it's the repair system. Normally in exercise, the fight or flight goes off the charts and parasympathetic goes to 0. In our study, the 2 opposite nervous systems coexisted. which means we had proved that the dynamic activity of fight or flight was coexisting with the internal experience of parasympathetic dominance and calm. That's what we call the coexistence of opposites. That's my best race, is my easiest race. When you have the two nervous systems that are, going into extreme fight or flight, stress your body to recover, break your body down to build yourself up. Wear and tear is the only way to actually make any, physical, performance gains. Old school. The new research, which isn't really that new because we did this 30 years ago, showed that you can actually get the same results or better by actually creating that internal experience of calm. By breathing through your nose, you can actually create alpha meditative brainwaves. Imagine running as fast as you can, but your brain in a meditative state. Imagine you're running as fast as you can, but your fight or flight system is matching your parasympathetic, which means you're rebuilding and rejuvenating. At the same time, you're going, as the winds of the storm are balanced by the eye of the storm, right? So this is a crazy concept, and it matches the experience that these athletes see, and it matches what they talked about in that book, The Rise of Superman, where these elite extreme athletes were risking their lives to create a couple of seconds of the zone, and we replicated it with a combination of yoga and some meditation. I think is a really good adjunct, and of course nose breathing versus mouth breathing. And we did the nose breathing versus mouth breathing. You can just type in nose breathing on my website at LifeSpa.com, and you can see the whole study printed there. You can also go to PubMed and type in my name, and the program was called Invincible Athletics back then, and then we wrote the book, and it was published as Body, Mind, and Sport. And this is something that I worked with a lot of elite athletes, not only professional tennis players, but professional triathletes. Colleen Cannon, a dear friend of mine, she was the #1 short course triathlete in the world. Scott Molina, he was an Ironman winner and one of the best triathletes of all time in the early days when I was competing. I worked with top mountain bike riders, John Weissenreiter, who was the #1 mountain bike rider in the world. World-class level cross-country skiers, Tara Sheehan, who was one of the oldest women to go to the Olympic trials. So in cross-country skiing, all of those sports require a lot of wind, right? And breathing through your nose is harder. It's much more work. Some researchers say it's 100 times more difficult. So there's a learning curve here, right? You're not going to just go out there and bang it out. It takes about 3 weeks of nose breathing to become a better nose breather, to flip the brain into the alpha state. And that's what we did in our study. We had the athletes, high school athletes, train for about 6 weeks and then came back and we did a mouth breathing versus nose breathing test. And that's the study that we published, right? So some simple things that you can do, and this is all in the article that might help you guys, get to that zone and get to that place. One is, the most important thing is when you go for your run, walk, workout, whatever it is, bike ride, start breathing deeply in through your nose. Go slow in the beginning, really deeply in and really deeply out. Really deeply in, really deeply out. Go slow, walk slow. I even prefer doing the sun salutation, which is a very specific exercise that opens up your rib cage and your diaphragm, which is critically important for breathing apparatus and helping you maximize and optimize breathing. So you can do some sun salutations before with deep nasal breathing. You create a long rhythm of your breathing in and out through your nose. At the very top of each breath and at the very bottom of each breath, you'll notice in the very beginning of your slow workout, we call this the resting phase, where you're just really exercising your lungs first. At the very top and bottom of each breath, there's a space, right? Just notice it's not a hold, it's just a natural space linking each breath. Then do that for about 5 or 10 minutes. Keep trying to take deeper, longer, slower breaths. Exercise lungs first, and then you go into the listening phase where you start to go a little faster. And as you begin to go a little faster, you just watch that breath rate. Watch the space between the breath. And as that space between each breath starts to shorten up just a little bit, you need to slow down and just pull back your intensity, slow it down, and reset that original slow space between the breath, that rhythm of the breath, long, slow, deep nasal breathing. Once you reestablish that rhythm, then you can try to pick up your pace again. And if you're on a treadmill and you were measuring it, you would see, and I did this for decades in health clubs, working with clients for years, you'll see that all of a sudden your performance goes from one level of intensity to another level, but your breathing stayed the same. In other words, when you go back to zero and you kind of reset your long, slow breath and you start to go faster again, you're going to go faster and harder than you did before with the same long, slow breath, maintaining the space between the breath. And for about 20 minutes or so, you just keep pushing it. And when the body says, no, I'm starting to breathe faster, or I have to open my mouth, that's an emergency breath, I immediately slow the pace back down. As soon as I slow the pace back down, reset that comfortable rhythm of the breath with the space naturally occurring between each breath, I try to go faster again, and you watch yourself improve your performance. As soon as the breath gets labored again, and you lose the space between the breath, or you open your mouth, you go back down and slow down. Even if you're riding your bike, you have to turn back and go down the hill for a little bit and then come back up to reset. It's all part of the training your respiratory system to be optimized and training your body to be more efficient in delivering oxygen. Because when you lose your deep rhythm of your breath, you lose the major detoxifying organ of your body, which is accessing the lower lobes of your lungs, where 80% of the blood is, where most of the exchange of waste and fat moves out of your body. So if you end up having to shallow breathe, you're losing your ability to detoxify. And it's getting it's not getting the oxygen in that is the limiting factor to our performance. It's getting the waste out. And as soon as we go from long, slow breathing to shallow breathing, which we do in most of our workouts, we lose that ability. We start building up lactic acid and metabolites that cause stiffness and soreness and aching and breaking down. Plus, when you pull the plug on the emergency before the emergency happens, you never go into the break your body down to build yourself up fight or flight response, right? You never have to go there. So that's the beautiful thing about this exercise. It's super, super simple. So go to my website at LifeSpa.com, type in nose breathing exercise, and all my articles will come up. Of course, my book, Body, Mind, and Sport, has all of it, step-by-step, play-by-play, how to go through it from an Ayurvedic perspective of exercise. But it's all for free on my website. Please check it out. It's really important, and particularly as you're watching the Olympics and you're watching all these amazing athletes getting into the zone, you can totally do that. You can create what I call respiratory efficiency. And respiratory efficiency is the end game. I call that when you enter the zone. And that's when all of a sudden, as you're increasing your workout and your breath rate, normally you reach a point where the breath rate gets faster and shorter. You have to open up your mouth to maintain that intensity. All of a sudden, what will happen is you'll start to increase your workout and your intensity, but instead of the breath getting shorter and shallow, it'll get longer and deeper and slower. That is when you've entered the zone. And that's called the performance phase. You have the resting phase, where you do the long, slow breathing, set that rhythm of the breath up. Then the listening phase, where you keep pushing it. As soon as the body says, no, I'm going faster through my nose or opening my mouth, I got to slow it back down. Keep doing that for about 20 minutes. Keep pushing the envelope, never pushing your body in or beyond an emergency response, which means shorter nose breathing or mouth breathing. And then keep pushing, and then at one point you're going to find yourself, all of a sudden, as you go faster, your breath will launch into a longer, slower, deeper rhythm of the breath. And then all of a sudden, you're working harder, your breath is slower, your brain flips into the alpha state, coherent state, parasympathetic levels are at matching sympathetic levels, and you're in the zone. And that's how you replicate it. There's a lot more to talk about here about this, but that's a little glimpse of it. Please check out the article about the zone, and hopefully you enjoy the Olympics, and hopefully you enjoy the benefits of nose breathing compared to mouth breathing during your workouts. Thanks for listening. I'm Dr.